The military offices of the Valteri were always very tense. Officers from every branch of the army were busy getting ready for the coming war. Every office, every communication post, and even every hallway was full of people working. The nearby Ishtal Empire had been building up ships at their border for a few days, and this morning, everyone's fears came true. The Empire told them they had to become vassals within a week, or they would use force to get what they wanted. It was a democracy in the Valteri Republic. It was not okay to bow down to a tyrann. Right away, they sent requests for help to all groups that might be able to help them. In the grand meeting hall of the army headquarters, the most important Valteri military leaders were waiting for the answers. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Negotiations finally walked into the room and began speaking. "I know you all don't have much time, so I'll get right to it. No one is going to fight for us in this war." The generals even got up from their chairs and were getting ready to leave because they were so upset. The Valteri did not have a strong force or enough industry to build and use their fleet. Their country was mostly used for farming. They had no chance without help from outside sources. The minister didn't stop. But the amount of economic sanctions against the empire and the offer of aid for people in need was much higher than we thought. "And please excuse me, Minister, could you explain yourself? What kind of armed help can we really count on?" The head of defense just spoke. He made it clear that all he wanted was real help from species that could give it. Well, the Kizzers, the Esti humans, and others all said they would help with preparation by giving a lot of military supplies and trainers. There was a sense of relief among the generals. All of those countries had strong armies and industries. Then the AA, what if they really kept those promises? Talk to the army chief. A connect. If I got it right, it's like a strategy advisor who will watch our moves and help us make them better. A field officer was seen. That sounded more like something that would bother her. "Why do we need strategic wisdom from people in the first place?" she inquired. "To begin with, humans have never lost a fight." "Are you kidding me?" A naval officer screamed. 45 years ago, they never won a fight against the Druv. Yes, they did win the war, though. In what way? Okay, I think I'll explain. What do you know? Some of us might get ideas from how people win wars. It was 50 years ago that people in a 30,000 light-year radius exported luxury items and everyday goods. However, growing humans were also starting to buy into that market, which meant that the Daru were making less money. Even worse, the Daru had been protecting the RCU trade station network without being asked to for almost 100 years. At about this time, the RCU signed a formal treaty to protect the area. With the people, it's safe to say that the Daru were very angry. Now seems like a good time to bring up the fact that humans and Daris lived very close to each other. It was 300 light-years wide and was called the Great Way. It divided their territories. Because there were no borders, it was great for trade, but it was also great for pirates, which is why the RCU was put there and why they needed to be protected. When the Daru went to war, they had a great force with hundreds of big ships like dreadnoughts and carriers. People, on the other hand, only had a few of these, and most of them were just trials. Their navy was still mostly made up of small ships like frigates, corvettes, and destroyers. The Daru navy was too strong for these kinds of ships, and they lost every battle of the war. It didn't matter, though. The human plan was, well, crazy, for lack of a better word. They blocked the Daru and kept it up with a fleet that was much smaller than their enemies. But why? The economy of Daru was pretty much self-sufficient, and it wouldn't fall apart without imports like a lot of other would. But the humans only wanted to stop their exports so that people would buy their goods instead. They didn't try to invade, take over, and win fights with their enemies, even when they were at war. No, peace and war were both ways to get to the same place. You may be thinking why the Daru didn't use their stronger navy to break the blockade. Well, their land was really big. It was possible for trading ships to get from Daru space to the Great Way through almost 7,000 different systems. As a result, The Daru did not have enough ships to put one in every system. Instead, they would jump to a system, push the humans out, and then move on to the next one. The humans would come back and destroy any trade ship that tried to go through the systems that were said to be free. People used everything they had to get ships on every system. They didn't think twice about pulling out plans that were decades old and sending them to the front lines. They made changes to a business cargo ship that was mass-produced to make it a cheap interceptor. It was the most cheap and ugly junk the galaxy had ever seen. But that didn't matter. Why was it important? Human dockyards could make 10 of those in a day without any trouble. For the last few months of the war, they had at least 7 ships in every Deirdre borderline. Then, whenever an enemy ship came into their system, the humans would just run away without fighting. They would fight if they had to, but only to buy time for others to get away. That's why they lost every fight. They didn't even try to win. The top leaders of the Daru quickly changed their plan. They don't try to clear every system. Instead, they just leave their ship in a few to make way. But as soon as the traders came into the Great Way, the humans would wait for them in the next systems and attack. In the end, the Daru had to send their fleet to a huge number of different systems just to keep one trade route open. It got worse. People started giving pirates weapons and told them they could go free after the war as long as they only attacked Daru ships. This plan put even more pressure on the Daru's resources and made sure the blockade stayed in place. There was another way to leave Daru land, but it cost more in border taxes. That was the worst part. Humans were able to get customers to switch to their products by raising the prices of Daru goods by 30 to 50% because of the blockade. Great news from the Daru's point of view. The real war hadn't even begun yet. While they were getting ready for a full invasion of humanity, the blockage was just a bother. People gave up just as their attack fleet was about to cross the Great Way, though. The Daru were very surprised by that, but they were happy with their easy win. Even when they were negotiating, the humans showed how smart and dishonest they were. They offered big war payments if they could keep the RCU under their control. The Daru officials were sure that the humans put a lot of value on the RCU, so they chose to take it without making any payments. Of course, this is exactly what people wanted. Following the war, most people turned to buying human goods and didn't go back to the Daru. It was expensive to keep pirates out of the RCU network, and it was only worth it if a lot of things were moving through it. The Daru were hurt because they couldn't get to their main source of income because a rock was tied to their legs. The humans had taken control of a huge market and earned the respect of most pirates by doing a great job. Friends, this is how people win wars. They don't just win glorious fights and shining conquests. They control every single detail in every field and have a big plan that covers everything. Based on the human philosophy, most of the generals in the room were already talking about new plans. The head of defense got up. You should tell the humans to send their attache. Let's hope they're just as good for us as they were against the Daru. Part 2 of how people win every war. The capital of Volterra was still in the same state of chaos it was in when the Ushtal ultimatum came 3 days ago. Everyone was getting ready for the worst because it seemed like every second brought the disaster closer. The Volterra people didn't just sit back and accept their fate, though. Instead, they were busy getting ready. Everyone, from the most powerful generals to the most common people, did what they could to help fight the threat. The city was in a state of panic, but most of the government and military leaders were in the Presidential Strategic Office, which was very quiet. The leaders of the Republic were waiting for a guest, so the mood was tense. They hoped that would help them figure things out. The human representative finally came into the room. For someone so important, she was pretty small and unimpressive, and the black Special Forces outfit didn't look good on her. She said her name was Commander Mora and that she was just a messenger for the human high command. It looked like some Volterra generals already felt bad about wasting their time on this secret meeting. No matter what, Commander Mora began her lecture. I'll start with the quick defense plan we came up with because it needs to be taken care of right away. On the big screen behind her, a picture of the Valtteri Republic showed up. It was marked with the Navy's protective line that they should try to set up, and the importance of protecting different systems. A lot of the generals looked down because they didn't think any new ideas were brought up. On the other hand, the people in the government were shocked. The foreign minister was the only one who wasn't doing it. He was trying not to laugh at how his coworkers were reacting. When there was a long pause, the Minister of Defense finally spoke. "Do you think we'll give up half of our land without a fight?" The head of defense let out a sigh. He had never liked his civilian peer because he thought their job was very similar to his own. The person who was in it at the time didn't make him feel better about it. "Please allow me to explain, sir." They talked, and he made sure to stress that the other person wasn't in the service. "I think I understand the human plan. In fact, it's a lot like the one I was going to suggest this afternoon." He turned to look at Captain Mora. "Would you like to explain it yourself, or go on? I'll finish your speech by adding anything you forgot." The head of defense shook his head and began. "In the first place, we are a farming country. Our 45 livable worlds are where most of our economic power and people live. If a system doesn't have one, it might as well be empty. In fact, they are pretty much. Aside from their possible strategic situation, they don't have any value. Take a look at the map. The land we're willing to give up is made up of these systems and isn't crossed by any trade routes that can't be easily moved. We don't lose anything by giving up on it. There is no win for the Ishtals. It does get 75 light years shorter for them, and 75 longer for us, though. This, along with the shorter border, will allow us to protect our core territory even though we are outnumbered. You made a good point, Field Marshal, but that's not all we'll do. The fact that we won't defend this land doesn't mean we won't fight there." "How do you mean?" "The army of the Ishtal is typical of these kinds of kingdoms. You don't get the job because you're good at it. Your awards and battle honors get you it. We need to make them think that we are protecting ourselves and that they are just stomping on us. But there's a catch. We need to make their worst generals, the knave children of the nobles, look as beautiful as possible. In any case," when she hit a button, pictures of Ishtal generals showed up on the screen. "And we need to make these guys look really bad in front of the Emperor because they are by far the best military leaders they have." One of the pictures was enlarged by her. "General Alrit of Whiffs here. He was probably the Empire's smartest military leader in hundreds of years. Even though he was born a commoner, his bravery and skill helped him move up the ranks. In our latter strategy, we have big hopes for him. For now, though, all you need to know is that you need to make his campaign look bad." After 5 years, General Alrit of Withus was very angry. He was sure of the reason why this operation had failed. It was easy for him to understand Valtteri's plan. But who could believe him when he did worse in a victory than a descendant of some noble house who wanted to shine? His men, of course, and the other generals who were smart enough to see what was being done, but they had also lost respect. The best soldiers and leaders in the kingdom were now guarding a border. In case things get worse, a bunch of incompetent jerks were launching pointless and expensive attacks one after the other, which used up even more of the Empire's resources. And now there was only one Volteri ship with people on board. What does that mean? The message was obviously going to be caught, but what was the point of this move? It was not possible that the Valtteri would defect, because they wouldn't do something without a reason, even if humans weren't around to help them. People were already a huge problem for the country before the war. They used the fact that trading with them was good for almost every country as a tool. For almost 20 years, they had been arming the people who were against the Ishtales, and what was worse was that it made money for them. Still, the general was a pain, and the Empire was a nice treat. The only way to grow that was still open was through the swarms area. The humans wanted them to leave as soon as possible, so they made sure they would be the most desirable military target in the area. "Good morning, General. We have captured the Valtteri. He says he's from the government and is here to talk." In a clear breach of protocol, His soldier called him General, instead of Your Excellency or Your Glory. But Ulrich liked it this way. It told everyone that his skills were more important than the titles he held or the land he owned. If only those awful parasites at the court knew it. They would wake up soon, though. The general got a scary grin on his face. Talk it out. In other words, the Voltaire knew what was going on. Anyway, having a friend would be helpful sometimes. Bring him to my office after making sure he doesn't have any weapons hidden. I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about. The Voltaire Minister of Foreign Affairs and General Ulrich were sitting down with us in the short but cozy room that the general had turned into his office. As soon as he was put in charge of this fleet, he turned his fancy apartments on the flagship into a place to store ammo and a second hospital. The court was angry about this, but he didn't care. He knew their needs were important, but it would be clear very quickly that he didn't need them. You're here to make a deal. Then why not get in touch with the emperor? We decided not to deal with someone who would soon lose the throne because it would be pointless. We'd much rather make a deal with this person who takes over. You're crazy to think I'd fight against my emperor. Even if it wasn't true, the army and the people are sick of the bad leadership these days. People will look up to you as a hero when they rebel. They'll want you to be king or queen. Rumors that the emperor is afraid of you are made stronger by the fact that you are kept away from the fight, as if that wasn't the result of the way you acted. We just gave the emperor an easy reason to do what he already planned to do. That kid is so sad. He lives under the shadow of his father because he didn't want to live under the shadow of his general. Soon, he won't live at all. He's just not made for the job. If it were just me, I'd let him live in exile. But if the old dynasty stays in power, the noble houses will never accept me as legitimate. But enough of that. Let's do something. What do you have to offer? We help you win the civil war and give you a couple of systems that don't do much to make your victory seem more real. You agree not to do any reivindication on our land in return. We'll also be willing to talk about trade in order to get you food, since that's really why we're here, right? Food costs more because the great houses are voluntarily cutting back on production to put pressure on the emperor to do what they want. It looks like our internal politics aren't a secret to you. Good job. I agree to the deal because it's good for everyone. We hope to meet soon to talk about things in a more serious way. He was the third and first emperor of the Withis dynasty. 14 months later, he had met with foreign officials and made many deals and agreements in the first 2 months of his reign. The nobles said, "He's selling us to other countries." They were free to say bad things about him. That would just give him more reasons to make them less powerful. The people, the army, and the lower nobility all supported him. And because trade and other changes made their lives better, he would keep it for a long time. After being crowned today, he would meet the human delegate. This could be the most important meeting since the Voltaire. He hoped that he could make a deal for guns. Still, it was the best way for them to make sure he would follow through with his plan to defeat the swarm, so they would probably agree. He started to smile when he thought about this. He did what the humans wanted him to do in the end, not because he was dishonest or manipulated, but because they told him it was the best thing for him and the kingdom. At that point, he understood that the saying "humans win every war" wasn't just true for the ones they fought.